one of the things that really shocked me, because we were never taught these things in school. Like when we were, I think like every adult who's probably older than 25 would never have been taught this in school at any point. And so I went to a school called Calvin High School here in Winnipeg, and it was literally about a 10-15 minute walk from Winnipeg Residential School. And we were never taught about it. So, there was a school that Indigenous kids were going to, and we never even knew it existed. So, and one of the things that was really difficult for me to understand was that, I was in my 20s before I found out that my grandmother, first of all, before I found out that residential schools even existed. So I didn't even know that they even existed. And, at the same time, I was a survivor, like I was a third generation survivor. And so like to not even know that they existed, but to be affected by them was something that like I've been, really trying to understand in my adult life. My dad, essentially would have gone to a residential school as well, but he went to a day school, and the day schools were not that much different than residential schools. The other thing I should say is that my grandmother, the only other thing that she said about her experience at residential school was that her sister died there. And so her sister is in an unmarked grave somewhere in Norway House. And so these things that are happening right now hit really close to home, because I've been to Norway House 2 or 3 times and have tried to find where she's buried, and I've never been able to find it. So my dad when he left the trap line when he was 9 years old, because he lived a very traditional life for the first 9 years of his life, he went to a day school in Norway House. And a day school was very similar to a residential school. And he wasn't allowed to speak Cree, and went through a lot of the same sort of really difficult experiences that a lot of kids in residential school went through. But what I came to understand, and I think this is where it's really kind of where I really understood how these things are passed down through my own life experiences, was I often got asked, especially early on in my writing career, why I never spoke Cree. Like I got asked that all the time, like, why don't you speak Cree? And even like there's like lateral violence within communities oftentimes. So it's like, even other Indigenous people who don't think I'm, sometimes a legitimate Indigenous person because I don't speak my language. And so there's not really a understanding, even sometimes within our own communities, how these things are, passed down and how we're traumatized by them. And that I think also speaks to the fact that, sometimes we weren't even taught about our own histories. My grandmother would have gone to residential school and would have not been able to speak her language the entire time. And so she would have had that sort of like, again, that sort of influence of Christianity and Western society, where the Cree language was devalued. So our language, like Swampy Cree, which is what we speak in Norway House, would have been very much devalued in residential school. So, would have been like, there's nothing that will help you in this language in the Western world. So you might as well just abandon it. And so, and my dad went through a similar experience in day school, where he learned English, and then through English learned all these subjects. And as he did that, he lost all the knowledge that he received as a kid, because he knew it all in Cree, and then he began to lose all that knowledge. And then when my brothers and I were born, I have 2 brothers, we were never taught Cree. And it was because the language was devalued so much that my dad thought, and was told by people who also went to residential school or day school, that there was no benefit in learning a Indigenous language. in fact, my brothers and I would have been worse off or dumber if we knew Cree. So my dad never taught me or my brothers the Cree language, and it wasn't until we were, young men when my dad began to realize that all of that was ridiculous. That we would have been far better off, more well-rounded, more connected to our culture, and also, like, I think it is of great benefit to someone to know a second language, right? So we missed all of that, and so now what we're seeing happening, and this is, one of the things that When We Were Alone is about, my picture book, is that in a lot of Indigenous communities across Canada and in the United States, Indigenous communities, Indigenous survivors who had, their language taken away, who had their culture stripped away, are going through this process of reclamation where they're trying to take back what was lost, or not what was lost, take back what was stolen. And so, what I've been trying to do, and that's why I incorporate language in a lot of my books now, is because I'm trying to either write books where Cree kids can see their own language in those books, and I think that's very empowering, or write books that help me to understand a language that I never learned. So, I can't speak Cree, but I'm beginning to learn word by word more and more of the language. And one of the things that I've lost, and what a lot of people are losing, is because of a lot of our elders are dying, is that they're dying with the language. And so we're under threat in a lot of our communities from losing the language because we're losing the elders. And so my dad passed away about a year and a half ago. And when he passed away, he couldn't teach me anymore. And my daughter was learning from him, and she couldn't learn anymore, and she doesn't want to learn from anybody but her grandfather. So now, she has to be able to be ready to learn from somebody else, because right now learning from someone else it really hurts her, because it makes her think about her grandfathers.